And we are live. We should be live at least. Hey, look at that. Entropy showed up with the volume down. It's amazing. I'm not catching the stream on DLive yet. Here it is. Let's if anything happened there, folks, that's because I refreshed real quick. Hopefully that did not stop the stream or anything. I can check that pretty quickly, though. Hey, Dollhawk, appreciate you showing up. Just going to check this on the live stream instead of where I'm at right now. Make sure that it's actually coming through. Happened there, folks. That's all right. Sounds like I'm coming through. And obviously, I know a lot of you will come in as we get started here. So move my stuff around. Guys, obviously, as always, I rely on you very much to make sure that all of the technical aspects of things are working just fine. So, please let me know if the screen glitches out or if still good there. Okay, cool, man. Or yeah, make sure that if the sound's off or anything like that. Just let me know. I'm not always the best with paying attention to those things. I'm more in my head thinking about what I'm going to say or, recalling things as I'm in the midst of reading. So I'm really going to try today and push through Bastiat. That way it's just said and done with. It's over with, and that way I can move on to other documents. We'll still read the politics of obedience. And there's a few minor news items I want to bring to everyone's attention. But more importantly, so I had to stream early yesterday, and I did not state overtly, but I did sort of hint at why. And that's because I was meeting with Michael Cisco for early dinner or whatever. My wife and I met with him at a restaurant around the corner, local restaurant. It was casual. Wasn't like he was there with a bunch of people or anything like that. And trying to get an idea of who he was and to see if I was willing to support him, which I think I am, although I'm curious how well he'll do against the incumbents. But right now in West Virginia, we have a little bit of an issue with congressional districts and that we're losing a seat. So let's see if I can get an article up here. Well, I had one up earlier, but basically we're going to go from 3 to 2. And with that, it's probably going to be divided between the northern and the southern. And Michael Cisco is running for the first district, which right now a gentleman is occupying named David McKinley. So I'm going to bring up his website real quick, and we're going to talk about him and some things. Now, McKinley has been a career politician. He is a Republican, but I don't want to call him a do-nothing. I don't know enough about him. He's not in my district, but he probably will be here soon, and this will be the person that Michael will need to primary. So he seems to be an intelligent guy. He went to Purdue University. He's a civil engineer, started his own business, and eventually got into the state legislature. And It can show you the breakdown of who voted for him, whatever, over the years. More importantly, though, what I want to get to is some of his positions. So he's an active supporter of the coal mining industry and domestic energy infrastructure. That's important for my state. He's really against gun control and having a right to conceal carry and reciprocity amongst the states. Says he receives an A rating from the National Rifle Association. That should mean nothing to nobody who cares about anything, because the NRA is a hack group. The fact that people like David Hogg and whomever else go after the NRA shows their lack of understanding of the gun rights issue. So yeah, he's anti-abortion. It seems to be, especially federal funds going there. Excuse me. Now, here's the interesting thing. Climate change. That he was voted for. This is McKinley, the current congressman for the 1st District in West Virginia. He voted for, he is very much into the climate change things. And in fact, he's been voted as a very bipartisan individual. I did have an article, but perhaps I did not bring it up. But in any case, he wrote an article in the USA Today about climate change and what we need to do and how it's one of our biggest threats in the United States and whatever else. So, yeah, not really all about that. Not that I'm not about new energy or better means or methods, but I'm not about the government coming up with these things or putting restrictions on us. And so that was an interesting thing. And this is the last thing I wanted to bring up. The most important thing, which is why this guy needs to be primaried. It says on May 19th, 2021, McKinley was one of 35 Republicans who joined in all Democrats in voting to approve legislation to establish the January 6th commission meant to investigate the storming of the U.S. Capitol. Now, perhaps he did this in trying to get a fair shake for those who went to the Capitol, but he just voted with Democrats, folks, for the persecution of politics, political beliefs. And if we live in a government by the people and for the people, those people should have been heard. Should they not? So I don't know why DuckDuckGo's saying the site isn't available, because I just had it up earlier. Here it is. So it does. Here's his little platform: energy and environment, jobs and economy, healthcare, immigration. Here's another one, though. Patient Access to Treatments Act brings fairness and common sense to the millions of Americans trying to pay for the cost of critical life-saving treatment. It can improve their quality, blah, 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 blah. If anyone is enthusiastic in the federal government towards reforming healthcare or whatever, and they want to do it through government programs, I am not for that in any way, shape, or form. We should be looking at expanding access to healthcare, making it a free market system instead of a centralized government control system. He does say, Obamacare continues to pursue a repeal of the healthcare laws that led to a double-digit increase in the cost of healthcare for many West Virginia families. So you can rail against Obamacare, but it's no good if you just want to replace it with something similar. It's not in the purview of the federal government. It's not constitutional. We'll go to environment and energy real quick. Again, I'm not going to cover these deeply, but obviously coal, the war on coal needs to stop, blah, blah, blah. Natural gas and oil. Natural gas and oil are very important to the economy. Energy efficiency has proven to be a key issue where Congress can find common ground. And then the environment. The production and use of fossil fuels does not have to come at the expense of our environment. I agree with all that, but what is he really doing? And let's look up David P. McKinley really quickly on the USA Today issue. How to fight climate change. So he wrote this with a Democrat, which is, not the worst thing on earth just because it's a Democrat. I'm not telling you guys to think that tribally. Hi, Holly. Appreciate you being here like everyone else, as always. So, innovation and regulation can curb climate change. We need bipartisan support for both. Our plan calls for a decade of investment and clean energy innovation and infrastructure development, followed by new regulatory standards. Sounds like a bunch of centralized control government to me. Representatives Kurt Schrader and David P. McKinley, opinion contributors. And this was just last year before the big old coof. Climate change is the greatest environmental and energy challenge of our time, is it? I still don't believe so. I've looked at the data for a long time now. I'm not sure that's true at all. I've looked at the predictions that have been wrong over and over again. I'm not sure that this is true at all. Sounds like that perhaps that this is a bit of a farce to bring about global unity in the acknowledgement of the current one world government, because really that's what we're talking about here, because the governments of the worlds work together. They work together through NGOs. There is a Anglo-American alliance that works with Israel very tightly. If you guys want to understand how those things work out, go look into the Rhodes Scholars or go read Carol Quigley's Hope and Tragedy, or the his book is the Anglo-American Alliance or something of that sort, which is a much easier read. So the reality is that's really what's going on. We have the ties to the banking system. The banking system has the ties to the crown. And our geopolitics are influenced by people who aren't even within our own nation. This is why governments share intelligence status with each other, because they're allowed to spy on each other, but not on American citizens or their own citizens. So what they do is they get foreign nations to do it and just trade in the intelligence. This, folks, is the very seeds of the global government. It's here. It's just not official. And this is why Trump was such a threat to them. Instead of energy policy that lurches in a different direction from every election cycle, we need a new approach to develop realistic solutions that will enjoy support from both parties and Congress. Setting a steady course would be a far better for both industry and environment. As members of Congress, the Republican representing West Virginia coal country and a Democrat representing coastal Oregon, we have joined together to craft such an approach. And we will intend to introduce legislation along these lines in the House of Representatives in 2020. Americans think the two parties are resolutely divided over climate. They are not. Each side has legitimate ideas about how to tackle the problem. Again, though, is it really a problem? See, all the framing here is that this is a truth. I'm not denying the climate changes as it is cyclical, but is it a truth that the world will be destroyed and the damage is irreversible within, a decade, according to AOC? No, I don't think that is true at all. I think that is a bunch of hyperbole. Republicans believe in the power of innovation. Democrats know when we also need regulation and that the current law isn't well suited to the job. We need a new approach that combines these ideas, innovation and reform regulation, in a pragmatic way. Solving for climate change can't depend upon the world reaching an agreement on how much more or willing to pay for cleaner energy. That's an argument with no end in sight, and we don't want to keep fighting about it. Yeah, that's good. Instead, we can work together and adapt policies that will make energy clean, technologies, and all fuels affordable. No. That is an industry job, not the government job. We'll get to this when we get to Bastiat here shortly. By approaching it this way, utilities can virtually eliminate air pollution, including carbon dioxide emissions from American electric power plants by mid-century, while keeping electric prices low or even lowered. Well, that would be a good thing, but this should be an industry standard, not something dictated by the government. And I know someone out there might go, well, what about what the EPA did and cleaning up the environment and blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe. I mean, John Stossel takes this point of view as a very libertarian individual. He likes the EPA. I don't. I think that we would naturally come about these things. And also, I would say that local municipalities should have a lot more power over this, or states themselves. It should not be a federal solution. You think that pollution here in West Virginia is as bad as it is in New York City? No, the cities are the ones doing the majority of the polluting. These same folks that want to lecture you about pollution are the ones causing it. Talking now, learning. So our plan calls for a decade of public and private investment in clean energy. No public investment. You're just throwing money down the drain, money that you are stealing from citizens that they need to live. And while hyperinflation is coming, this is stupid. Granted, this article is over a year old. In any case, it continues for a while. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Reducing clean energy costs is key. There's no way to do that except through innovation and industry. Governments cannot do that. All they will do is subsidize it and then make it more inefficient. We expect complaints about our approach from both the left and the right, not to mention from economic professors. Well, there you go. Those are the people you should probably be listening to on this. Though we agree on core principles, our bill is not complete, blah, 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 blah. So, in any case, I don't have a problem working bipartisanly, but on what? What are we talking about? If it's a bipartisan effort to, let's say, audit the Federal Reserve, I'm all about that. So anyways, this was Michael B. McKinley, and it looks like, as they redistrict, Michael Cisco will be going up against him. The EPA is keeping you from getting 50 miles per gallon. Go figure that one out. Yeah, that I don't know anything about that, Dollhawk, but that would not surprise me in any way, shape, or form. So Mr. Cisco, who I said I met with yesterday, and my wife, when we wanted to help him out, I'm going to help volunteer for his campaign. Again, I'm not sure that he's going to be the best candidate as far as what people look toward, but I think he's got a genuine spirit. He worked for Lauren Witzke's campaign. He's done several campaigns. He's been setting up various events and things for a long time. So, why not support this guy? He's a Trump style guy, and he definitely doesn't believe that what happened at the Capitol was the worst thing ever. And again, guys, I'm not going to sit here and claim that everyone at the Capitol was right either. Let's be realistic. There were some people there who did things that they shouldn't have done. Oh, hey, look, Entropy says I got 4 viewers. That's pretty good. Uh-oh. Here we go. By the way, guys, if you go over to DLive, I did put panels in there with links in the description for the YouTube link, the Entropy stream, Subscribe Star, and then 2 links for the ends justify the memes. I couldn't get the link for the Entropy for the ends justify the memes, and I looked at the Subscribe Star over there. This is how good Tank is about doing stuff on his own, and the Subscribe Star hasn't even been approved. So, not that that's like a big deal. I mean, Tank's got a day job, and I'm not expecting YouTube to make me rich or anything. So, not a big deal, but just saying that we've been doing the show for like 8 or 9 months, so you would think it would have been approved by now. I'll have to go and figure that out later. So, is what it is. So anyways, Michael Cisco, the candidate who is running, you can find him at cisco2020.com, and this is just his platform. So the first thing is a 10-year moratorium on all regulation. It says the corporate elite have continuously worked against the interest of working class Americans. While corporate profits raise, American wages have remained stagnant. Elites have replaced and undermined the American labor force through cheap foreign replacement, either via outsourcing or through various employment, via abuses such as H-1B. Yeah, it's been highly abused. Michael Cisco will work towards abolishing the H-1B and J-1A visa scams, and bring manufacturing back to the United States to end their reliance on China. We must also build a culture worth assimilating to, and bring people based on their ability to assimilate, not skills with which they can replace current American citizens at a lower cost. And I think that's pretty reasonable. Oh, hey Val, how you doing? Appreciate you being here. So I told Michael that I think 10 years is a bit extreme because you can't be in office that long and things will change and politics will switch. But otherwise, I get the notion. I've said the same thing. I would say 3 or 4 years and then reassess. But this is just a personal preference of mine. I wouldn't make plans for 10 years out for myself. 3 to 5 years. That's it. 3 to 5 year plans, because anything beyond that, lots of stuff changes, folks. I cannot imagine at 40 years old my life when I'm 50, other than I know I'm going to have a 10-year-old daughter at that point. I mean, I don't see how that's going to work out. I'm going to have a 27-year-old and a 10-year-old and maybe a couple other kids, hopefully. So I don't think I'll be in this home. I think 3 to 5 years from now, I'll be out in the mountains. We'll be living in our little communities that we're talking about building. But 10 years seems a long time out. But again, I'm not trying to disparage Michael in any way. Again, he's a very nice guy. We had good discussions. We only hung out for about an hour and a half, but I'm going to keep in touch with him. And I told him to let me know when he's in the area. So he'll probably be in the area again next week. So we'll probably meet up again next week. But, we talked about Christian orthodoxy and other things. We talked about, monarchy. And, of course, like most of the Orthodox, he's a fan of monarchy. He gave me some good reasons, but I'm not buying it yet. I don't know. But again, I have more sympathies toward the Anabaptist type movement. But I think that the Anabaptists and the Orthodox actually have a lot of overlap and carryover with each other, from what I understand of them. Either way, I don't think in the end it matters. I think that, it's following the tenets of Christ, and Christ judges us based on our understanding of him. Support the right to life. Michael Sisko is unapologetically pro-life. He believes that all life begins at conception. Every person deserves to catch life if conceived. Work tirelessly toward putting an end to our society's greatest black eye, the mass genocide of the unborn. We support a constitutional amendment to protect the life of the unborn. Now, this will never go through as the United States is currently put together. But Roe v. Wade was a bad call, for sure. It's not a constitutional right to murder babies in your womb, folks. It's just not. And it is, though, a state's right if they wish. If California wants to let you murder babies up until and right after they're even born, that's California's right. And we know that they'll push for things like that, as crazy as they've been. But this goes back to left-right paradigms, or however you want to talk about it. By the way, Michael, I should shill him real quick. He hasn't done anything on here in a while, but he does have a St. Edward's Media where he has done things for, I don't know, the past year or so. He's not anymore so much because he's doing campaigning. But he had a interview on here with Jay Dyer. A lot of this is about Orthodox Christianity. I watched part of his interview with Jay Dyer. They kind of got into some of these things about the Western world and why the wrong theology has brought about revolutions and whatever else. And I would kind of agree with that. At the same time, they're preaching monarchy again. So, but just to say, if you guys want to go investigate Michael for yourselves, I don't think anyone watches me is in West Virginia. Although we did have some followers on DLive that were, I think. That is for the ends justify the memes, at least. So protect gun rights. The radical left and even supposed moderate Democrats have made it very clear they want to take away your right to bear arms. This is obvious. Even though the left will tell you, especially the Twitter leftists, no, we don't. No one's trying to take your guns away. Yet on the issue before that, abortion, if you want to at least restrict it to first trimester, they think that you're taking a woman's right away to murder her baby. So there's that. In any case, This is accompanied through consistent fear-mongering coupled with an unwillingness to address real social ills that lie behind the violence of our nation. Yes, with the Marxist mob in our streets burning down our cities and calls to defund the police, the right to defend life and property with firearms has never been more important. Michael Cisco will protect your Second Amendment right and work against all infringements against it. Every person has the inherent right to defend themselves and property with the best available technology. This includes ending the process that has slowly chipped away at the rights given to you by the founders of this nation. Our platform will not allow the boiling of the frog any longer. No red flag laws under any circumstance. So that would go against, of course, Mr. Dan Crenshaw of Texas ilk. All you base Texans out there. It is funny that a lot of you guys are from Texas. It is a big state, but I don't have any viewers from West Virginia. Come on. Although some of the viewers may be moving here. So in political persecution, big tech has maneuvered itself into an unbreachable position of power. Companies such as Facebook and Twitter instantly marketed themselves as neutral platforms, not responsible for content, blah, 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 blah. So again, you can read this. He's going against this, breaking this up. This versus, I don't have McKinley's platform pulled up anymore. Let's see here. Why did that double on me? No, we can read through all these. I don't really care to, but I bet if we did, it's pretty standard fare. And what we need are young voices. We need young people in our government with radical ideas on the right. We do, because the left pushes radical ideas all the time. And if we get into the Hegelian dialectic, which is what all this is about, the Republicans basically go, oh, we don't want that little bit. And then when the Democrats do it, they go, well, okay, let's try to adjust it within the system. They never do anything. So there does need to be someone pushing back in a more extreme form. And again, this is part of the reasons why I'm going to support this gentleman and going to try to help him. And normally I would not tell you to work with federal campaigns, but this would be my congressman if elected. So I do think it's important for me having the opportunity to be involved. And if you guys have opportunities, you should get involved as well with your local congressmen or senators or whomever. But again, the priority should be your local community, your city, your county, whatever it is. You should be focusing there. If an opportunity comes where there's a good candidate or someone who is pushing things that, despite how extreme or radical they may be, if they're pushing things that are different than the normal neocon establishment talking points, you should be endorsing them, because this hegemony that we have in the federal government needs to be broken apart. Most of you don't claim Crenshaw. He's not the worst. But yeah, he's teetering on the edge of neocon for sure. He is really good in speeches and education. I find that when Crenshaw goes out and he speaks about socialism and the stupidity of all that, I mean, he's really good with that. He's like a Ben Shapiro type. He rides that line of the conservative ink, right? But the most disheartening thing I saw about Dan Crenshaw is actually he's part of the Young Leaders for the World Economic Forum. Now, I don't think that you get a choice in that. I think they nominate you, but he is a part of that. So, and I've covered that before in the past, which is all, of course, about globalism. And to my mind, folks, also, when I rail against this stuff, it's because, look, I know it will happen because this is the biblical perspective, at least from what I understand, of how the world is supposed to go. But it doesn't mean that I cannot protest it or say, well, I don't want it to happen, or I would like to slow it down, or I don't want this horrible system to be implemented upon us. In fact, I think as a Christian, I should be protesting it. And much of what I do here, guys, if you haven't figured it out, is based in my faith. We support our West Virginia union workers at the right to collective bargaining and fair wages. Fair enough. All Americans deserve the right to earn a living large enough to start and care for a family. We also oppose radical left measures that threaten to destroy the labor industry that relies on fossil fuels. The Democrat Party has abandoned the American working class while paying them lip service. They have pushed a far left radical agenda upon them. Part of that's through the unions, but fair enough, and that you are allowed to collectively bargain. Now, I've brought up to you before. There was a lady running for Congress here the other year, or maybe it was Senate. I can't even recall now. And I called her the AOC of West Virginia. She wanted to end right to work in the state, meaning that only work would be provided via the unions. That is insane. No, it wouldn't be only, because obviously there are mom and pop stores and whatever else. But again, that is more centralization, more control, more government, and less actual individual power. And by the way, folks, right to work states tend to be far more prosperous than all the unionized areas and states. In fact, very few of them have been successful, like New York. Most of them have been utterly destroyed, like Chicago and Detroit. So consider that. The Democrat Party has abandoned the American working class. I already read that. While at the same time undermining the wages with mass immigration and climate change sensationalism. Our immigration policy works hand in hand with American workers who are often replaced by less expensive foreign workers, either by offshore or work visas. Say no to forever wars. I'm not even going to get into this. Michael's a vet himself. So, let's not do like he's sitting here right here saying foreign aid will be rediverted for domestic projects, stealing foreign aid with contingencies to manipulate other cultures for the purpose of spreading Western values must end. And again, guys, I'm not saying that he's even getting into office is going to be able to get anything done. But at least I believe that he'll try. And the more people we get in who are trying, the more likely that things will eventually change. But again, I don't have a lot of hope for the federal level of things. Michael personally expressed to me only because he's worked on federal campaigns, which is why he's doing this, because this is his experience versus working on the very local level, right? Dalhuck says, not everyone deserves to make enough to support a family. You want to support a family, support a family skills. Yeah, right. Be personally responsible. Agreed. Or lower your cost and your standards of living, which is what my wife and I have tried to do. Because guys, I could be making far more money. I could double our salary nearly, or what she makes, between the two of us. In fact, when I left the hospital, basically what she made at Project Veritas was what I was making there and what she was making when she was at Students for Liberty combined. So I could definitely do more, but chasing money, right, is not an ideal way to live. We made this choice, so I'm taking the opportunity to build things and do things aside on my own. It might take a while, but it will pay off in the end. What I'm doing now gave me the opportunity to speak with Michael. I would not have had the chance if I was working previous professions. I just would have been too busy. And, we want to build a home around and a family around our home and our family, and not having to be at work and outsourcing the raising of our children to other people. So there are reasons, there are things that you should pay attention to that when it comes to working, that maybe going out and making an extra $20,000 or $30,000 a year sounds good. Maybe it's an extra $40,000 or $50,000 a year, but is it really worth it for your quality of life? What hedonistic things are making you spend so much money all the time? And granted, I get the inflationary issue and whatever else. In fact, I'm going to talk about that here soon. The foundational unit of every society is the nuclear family. The family unit is the smallest form of government in any society, and if the family is in a disarray, the entire nation is weak. Amen to that. That is absolutely true. It is no coincidence that the family unit has been under attack for decades and is currently being reimagined by forces on the far on the left, such as radical feminists and the LGBTQ coalition. Now, again, I'm not saying that anything that Michael is saying is going to fly well on the left, but I do think that a lot of West Virginians would resonate with this, and he's not saying the old run-of-the-mill stuff. Like drug addiction and opioid abuse, that was an important issue in the state. I'm pretty sure it's died down a good bit. Let's go here to Mr. McKinley's immigration stance real quick. Our immigration system is broken. That's why Congressman McKinley believes in any immigration reform must start with the securing our borders and taking interior enforcement of our immigration law seriously. There's not really a lot there. He will not support amnesty for anyone who enters this country illegally. Okay, well, that's pretty basic. But this, I did read about the other day. This troubles me, given that, I don't have a problem with bipartisanship per se if the issue is correct. But being a bipartisan also means that you are propping up the government that is currently tyrannical, in my opinion. Otherwise, there would not be 400 some odd people sitting in federal prison right now, the majority of which just walked through the Capitol building and took selfies with the police who allowed them in. McKinley named one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. It says it puts him at 10th out of 435 House members. And West Virginians, once again, have this legacy of blue dog Democrats that they are always going back to. But the state's turned really red. We must provide government incentives to encourage Americans to get married and have children. The current birth rate resides under replacement levels, which is compounded by monstrous numbers of abortion, mass illegal and illegal immigration. These practices spell certain death for America and will turn America into nothing more than a globalist trading zone. That's what it is already. That's what the entire world is supposed to be, folks. We can replicate and improve on programs enacted by nations such as Hungary and Poland. They have shown what is possible. So this guy's a pretty hardcore trad, and they are doing a trad convention. E. Michael Jones will be there. Brother Augustine, that is Michael Witkoff, who we spoke with on the show, who connected me with Michael. That is Michael Cisco. They'll be there. That's all in Indiana on the 12th. Let me see if I can find that real quick. If you guys do the Twitter, you can find Michael Cisco there as well. What was that? June 12th. Yeah, here we go. Trad anime Triad. Triad, not trad. How do you even spell trad, guys? I can't spell. There's an I in there, right? Here it is. Oh, in South Bend. That's old Buddha Gigs town. So here we go. Here's E. Michael Jones. I'm not a big fan of his or anything like that, but these are the people that are going to be there. By St. Edward's Media, that is Michael Cisco. He told me that he was going to be dissolving the company, though. So it says, for far too long, the conservative movement has compromised and capitulated to the left. We have slid down the slippery slope, and our society is now on the brink of collapse. No longer are we merely debating abortion and same-sex marriage. Now we are arguing against drag queen story hour and the normalization of pedophilia. That's true. There is barely anything left to conserve, and that is why we need not a conservative movement, but a restoration movement, a movement to restore traditional values. We must stand for truth and preserve a traditionalist future for ourselves and future generations. Speaking so far includes Michael Witkoff, Stephanie Lorzinski, Michael Sisko, David Patrick Harry, and Tom Kowalski. I don't know all these folks, guys. And surprise speaker, keynote speaker, Dr. E. Michael Jones. And it's like $50. I would be here. 100% would be here if I could be. My wife is due that week, though, so probably not a smart idea. But it's not too late if you guys want to go to the conference. You can find it on Everbright or elsewhere. Again, just thought I would bring this stuff up. This is why I streamed early yesterday again, because, well, I wanted to meet with Michael. Let's go down here. So, just quick bio. He's a veteran, former infantryman of the Maryland and Florida National Guard. Before entering politics, he worked in a number of different fields, including truck driving and food service, became an Orthodox Christian in 2014, and entered the political arena in 2018 as a commentator. In 2019, he would become a volunteer team leader for the Trump victory and eventually worked on several different campaigns. Arguably, his most impressive work was the management of Lauren Witzke's campaign for U.S. Senate in Delaware, having received more votes than any Republican in the history of the state of Delaware, even more than Donald Trump received in 2016. So they apparently did something right behind the scenes. And again, you can go over to St. Edward's Media on YouTube. If you want to hear Michael speak, of course, you guys can tell me your thoughts about him or whatever if you like. But I just want you to be aware of this. And this is the kind of stuff that you all need to try to do as well. This is part of why, well, I created an old YouTube's channels. All right, real quick. Let me run through, see if there's any chat here anywhere. Joshua Ham says, restoration movement or create a punk rock, anti-authoritarian counterculture that believes in values and morals. I think claiming the title of revolution would be a good marketing technique. Well, it's interesting you use that word revolution because Ron Paul used it. And Ron Paul's book, his campaign book, The Revolution, was a big wake up to me and reading it and being like, oh, wait a minute. The system is way more entrenched and they do things I didn't even know about. Of course, I was still in my early 20s. But I know this from what Michael has told me is he's not a revolutionary, and I don't think any Christian should be. But restoration, I don't know, man. To me, I just think that ideally for me, the best thing to do is to break off, scale down everything, let people live peacefully amongst themselves. The arguments that they have for monarchy is the reflection of God in heaven, that God is basically a monarch and therefore it's supposed to be here on earth. That's very mystical to me because that's an occultish idea. I'm actually surprised that Michael Witkoff, although he's deeply into the Orthodox faith, that he would say that, having a background from occultism, because it's the idea of so above, so below. What is above, so below? And this is very occultish stuff. This is why we have a reflection pool in front of the Washington Monument. It's literally meant, the Washington Monument is an obelisk, which is a phallus, if you didn't know, that represents the ascension into godhood. This is the occult meaning of it. And the reflection of it and the reflective pool in front of it is that as above, so below. So there's always stuff there. But again, I'm not here to pick out the minutia and the little details, because at some point it's like bickering over nothing. you could go for another mohawk. My wife would love if I had little white balls right now, the side shaved down. She likes it when I got that going on. I hate messing with my hair though. It's wild. When it's long, I don't have to do much with it. All right, guys. So I wanted to play this for you. This is from Forbes Business. Sorry, Forbes Breaking News. My mistake. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this was good within the federal government. Although it's just a bunch of guys talking about Biden and going against Biden, but they're going to just vote for $100. When it comes time to pass the federal budget, they're going to vote for it. So keep this in mind. I'm not going to play this whole thing, just a few minutes of it.
6.2%. So we're clearly seeing inflation. Since I got up here a little over 2 years ago, I've been talking about inflation and the risk of excessive government spending causing inflation. Joe Biden won't talk about it. Where's Joe Biden? He will not talk about inflation, even though he's proposed $7.1 trillion in spending. Historically, government spending has always caused inflation, excessive government spending. So today we have a contest that you guys all get to participate in. So I hope you're ready with your answers. It's called Biden's. It's like The Price is Wrong, but it's The Price is Right, but now it's The Price is Wrong because...
Look at Rick Scott trying to be cool. I've noticed this a lot. I didn't even know this guy's almost 70 years old. Did you know that? I looked him up earlier today. And I was like, he's 68. I was like, oh my goodness. He looks quite youthful. But yeah, we need more young people in the government. And these old people need to, not that older people shouldn't be listened to or anything, but they kind of need to go away. Because it's their generation, largely, that brought us to the point where we're at. Now, the generations before that betrayed us as well. Don't get me wrong. But as far as who has been in control and power for the last 30, 40 years in the government, it's been mainly boomers.
The wrong things are happening. So first off, what do y'all think as far as how much in the last 12 months, and these are products that everybody, it impacts everybody, right? Milk, bread, and gas. How much as a percentage, how much is milk up in 12 months?
50%.
50%. Anybody else? Okay.
30%.
30%. So milk is up 5.5%. Okay. Now, first off, people think, oh yeah, but people think about that. 5.5% is not a lot, but I can tell you already, over 80% of Americans are saying they have to tighten their belts, and 80% of Americans are concerned about the price of milk and bread and diapers and gas and things like that. All right, let's see if we do better with bread. How much is bread up as a percentage?
5%.
All right, it's up.
Joshua says baby blood has restorative health. Yeah. That's adrenochrome, right? Adrenochrome. Which is interesting, guys, if you go to look up that stuff, because other than conspiracy sites, you cannot find anything on it. Really, although there is a scientific adrenochrome. So
7.4% just in 12 months, right? And how about gas? Now, everybody has to buy gas. How much is that up? 51%. How many of you have filled up your car lately?
Okay, so this is like the consumer price index and how they measure inflation. It does not take everything into account. But what they go into here, and again, I'm not going to play this whole video. You guys can go watch it for yourselves. What they get into is the compounding effect and Biden's $6 trillion budget and all that other stuff. So there were several senators that speak here. This is led by Rick Scott, though. And I think they did a pretty good job, despite it being minorly cringy and them trying to be cool with The Price is Right, which I don't know about you, but I quit watching when Bob Barker left because I like Drew Carey, but he ain't no Bob. I don't even know. Does he even still do that? Val, Ron Paul saved you. He saved a lot of people. And that was the beauty of his campaign, is that it was an educational campaign. And that's actually, if worse comes to worse, what I would hope for Michael Sisko, that is that his campaign be a campaign of education. That people wake up and maybe the locals will vote locally better. But again, I hope you guys go check him out. And if you can at any point, it's Michael Sisko, once again, with an S, Sisco. And, if you can throw him like $5 or something for his campaign, please do so if you're able to. If not, then, or if you don't want to support him, if you think someone else is a better candidate, then sure, do your thing. Is that line from Happy Gilmore? The price is wrong, Bob. All right, guys. So let's do like 10 minutes of Jesus of Testimony, and then I will get into Bastiat's the Law. We'll try and finish it today, and we'll read a little bit of the politics of political servitude.
Suggests that both Pliny and the Christians he interrogated assumed that Jesus was a historical person.
Part of what we're looking for is existence, trying to give a case, an argument for those who go with a purely mythical Jesus theory and say that there's no evidence really for the existence of Jesus beyond the Christian scriptures. And we think that certainly Thales, certainly Pliny the Younger, Suetonius give us that.
Lucian of Samosata, a 2nd century Greek writer, warned his readers about the dangers of Christian teachings, never assuming that Christ was unreal. In the late 2nd century, the philosopher Celsus wrote the first known full-scale attack on Christianity called True Doctrine. It is worth noting that Celsus taught that Jesus was a sorcerer or magician. If the story of Jesus were a recent legend, it seems obvious that ancient critics like Celsus would have argued this point instead of wasting time by offering counter-explanations for his miracles. These independent accounts, such as Celsus and Lucian, prove that even in ancient times, the opponents of Christianity never doubted the historicity of Jesus.
So Jesus' miracles were widely known. Nobody tried to get around them and say that they didn't happen. They tried to explain them as saying these weren't from God if they didn't agree with him. But nobody denied that Jesus was known for that. And most scholars today acknowledge that Jesus was experienced by his contemporaries that way, including scholars who don't believe in miracles, but they believe that Jesus was experienced by his contemporaries as a miracle worker.
Finally, there are two very important non-Christian ancient sources that provide significant information about the historical Jesus.
One ancient non-Christian source that mentions Jesus would be Tacitus, the Roman historian. He's regarded as the most accurate of the Roman historians, and he's writing at the beginning of the 2nd century, around the year 115.
To suppress, therefore, the common rumor, Nero procured others to be accused, and inflicted exquisite punishments upon these people, who were in abhorrence for their crimes, and were commonly known as Christians. They had their denomination from Christus, or Christ, who in the reign of Tiberius was put to death as a criminal by the procurator Pontius Pilate. This pernicious superstition, though checked for a while, broke out again and spread not only over Judea, the source of this evil, but reached the city Rome also.
So from this, what we do is we get corroboration of the gospel accounts and Paul that Jesus had been crucified by Pontius Pilate. Also, according to the Gospels and Acts, that after Jesus was crucified, that the Christians went into hiding. And so therefore you can understand why Tacitus would say the Christianity was checked for the moment. And then he said it broke out again in Judea where it started. Well, where is Jerusalem? Where's Galilee? It's Judea. This is completely consistent.
So again, what this documentary shows, it will show internal sources. It makes various arguments, including the writings of the early church fathers, how much documentation we have for the church in the beginning. We know that countless numbers of scriptures were, and I don't mean scriptures we don't have anymore. I mean scriptures that were copies of scriptures in numerous churches. They were burned. They were burned by Roman account. So yet we still have more ancient documentation for Christianity than pretty much anything. And they'll go through this.
With the early church following the Great Commission of Jesus to go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples of all peoples. So that's pretty neat. That's from Tacitus.
Perhaps the most remarkable source is Josephus. Josephus was a first century Jewish historian. He doesn't have a bias against Jesus. He's not a follower of Jesus. He doesn't say he believes he's the Messiah. But he calls Jesus a sage.
Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man. For he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as receive the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold, these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians so named from him are not extinct at this day.
Most agree that there's been some Christian interpolation here. But it's highly unlikely that Josephus, who was not a Christian, just a Jewish historian, that he would say that this reference, indeed, if he was just a man. That sounds like a believer. Or to say that virtually confesses he was the Messiah. That's very unlikely. Or it's unlikely that Josephus would have granted that on the third day Jesus rose. And so most scholars argue, for a variety of reasons, that those things have been interpolated.
Now, there are some things that were added by later scribes, but scholars are able to reconstruct, based on Josephus' style and so on, the part of Josephus' saying that was most likely original. And the scholar's reconstruction has been confirmed by the discovery of an Arabic manuscript of Josephus that has it in the same form that they had thought was most likely. Josephus says that Jesus, he's also talked about John the Baptist and James, the brother of Jesus. He says that Jesus was a sage, he was very popular with the people, talks about him being handed over by the elite leaders of his people. It wasn't all of his people, it was just certain people in Jerusalem who did this, handed over to the Roman authorities who had him executed. But Josephus also says that Jesus was a worker of paradoxa. And that's a term that Josephus elsewhere uses for another prophet, for Elisha, referring to Elisha's miracles. So most scholars, notably Geza Vermish, a Jewish scholar at Oxford, have argued that Josephus acknowledges Jesus as a wonder-working sage.
There is a second reference to Jesus within Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews, a passage which a large majority of scholars have regarded as authentic in its entirety. Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road, so he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges, and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others, or some of his companions. And when he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law, he delivered them to be stoned. There is much we can know about Jesus historically from non-Christian sources, that he existed and accomplished powerful works that even hostile sources acknowledged.
On the other hand, it's really not fair to exclude Christian sources, because many people in the earliest decades of the Christian movement became believers, not because they were raised in a Christian home, but because the testimony about Jesus that was passed on to them was so credible that they converted. And so it's really unfair to exclude all of the early Christian writers who followed that kind of a pilgrimage, because it was the very evidence that they then go on to narrate that led to their conversion. It's not that they began with it, somehow presupposed it, and were looking for reasons to justify it. Neither is it appropriate to exclude the four Gospels a priori. It's sometimes said, but they're books of theology, not just historical record, and that's certainly true. But then every ancient biography, every ancient history writer had an ideological purpose. The idea of recording facts just to have a comprehensive chronicle of something is really a modern invention of the last few centuries. Nobody in the ancient world would have dreamed of bothering. And so unless one is prepared to be suspicious on ideological grounds of every ancient source on every topic, in which case we would need to throw out our textbooks of world civilization, which nobody is doing. What's fair to do is to read the Gospels and assess them on their own merits. There are all kinds of internal criteria for authenticity that make the Gospels impressive documents, and that could be another lengthy conversation.
And we'll leave that there. We'll come back to that Monday. So I hope you guys got some sense of many of the things that I often talk about in the apparent historicity outside of the scriptures. And of course, this gets into the scriptures. This gets into the historicity of them. That is, if they are valid or not. It gets into later on, I think the last section of this talks about miracles and modern miracles with people, including there's a section at the end talking about this, about a guy who actually has official paperwork from the doctor's office saying that he was blind and was healed from his blindness. Says, I miss Nick Plur. Okay. I've been listening to a channel. Roy Potter gives talks on this subject. Okay, well, I'll have to check that out myself. I try to, when you guys give me like stuff to look at, I try to look at it, but I mean, of course, like everybody else, I am watching and following my own stuff quite often. So let's see here. I'm going to assume this is the channel you're talking about. Hopefully you can confirm here in the chat. So I'm assuming this is the guy.
Welcome to the Potter Expositor with Royston Potter. Former U.S. Army officer.
Let's see. Okay, cool. Well, I'll make sure to, like I said, delve into him some more myself. With that, guys, I want to go over and read some of the law and try and get it finished out for us. We've been reading it over the course of, 3-4 weeks now. Matt says, if you ask Amazon Alexa who Muhammad was, it says he was a wise man. Ask if Jesus Christ says a myth, a fairy tale, or something like that. Antichrist Stephen Crowder did a thing about it. Yes. I saw that. I don't know if that's changed or not, though. But yeah, I'd seen that from several people, actually, at the time when that was coming out. So, guys, from Bastiat's The Law, Socialist Fear of Liberties. Well, what liberty should the legislator permit people to have? Liberty of conscience. But if this were permitted, we would see the people taking his opportunity to become atheists. Liberty of education. But parents would pay professors to teach their children immorality and falsehood. Besides, according to Mr. Theirs, if education were left to national liberty, it would cease to be national and would be the teaching of our children the ideas of the Turks or Hindus. Whereas, thanks to this legal despotism over education, our children now have the good fortune to be taught the noble ideas of the Romans. Then liberty for the liberty of labor. But that would mean competition, which in turn leaves production unconsumed, ruins businesses, and exterminates the people. Why do I feel like I read this the other day? Oh, because I did. Because I looked at the wrong part. We should be at law and charity are not the same. Haha. Yes, that's where I started off yesterday, I believe. So, my mistake, folks. Here we go. We should be here. As you can see, I'm always on point. So, law and charity are not the same. Again, my mistake. It must be the nice weather today because I haven't seen the sun since Monday, since Memorial Day. It's been nothing but gross and rainy here, and the nice weather has me distracted. I wish I were outside right now. The mission of the law is not to oppress a person and plunder them of their property, even though the law may be acting in a philanthropic spirit. Its mission is to protect persons and property. Furthermore, it must not be said that the law may be philanthropic if, in the process, it refrains from oppressing persons and plundering them of their property. This would be a contradiction. The law cannot avoid having an effect upon persons and property, and if the law acts in any manner except to protect them, its actions then necessarily violates the liberty of persons and their right to own property. The law is just, simple, and clear, precise, and bonded. Every eye can see it, and every mind can grasp it, for justice is measurable, immutable, and unchangeable. Justice is neither more than this nor less than this. If you exceed this proper limit, if you attempt to make the law religious, fraternal, equalizing, philanthropic, industrial, literacy, or artistic, you will then be lost in the uncharted territory, in vagueness and uncertainty, in a forced utopia, or even worse, in a multitude of utopias, each striving to seize the law and impose it upon you. This is true because fraternity and philanthropy, unlike justice, do not have precise limits. Once started, where will you stop? And where will the law stop itself? And this is all right. This utopia that he talks about is what we talk about all the time here or over on the Edge Justify the Memes, and that there is no perfect government or society. Now, my answer to that would be that you all be religious and hold Christ as your king, and therefore you will act accordingly. But I know that that's not going to be the case, that most of the world will reject Christ. So my next solution would be to have a very, very small, minimized government that only presides over a few thousand people, because there is always a scaling issue and an issue of accountability. And that the law, like Bastiat states here, can only be used for justice, and that justice is in self-defense of the people. It should have no other bounds or no other means to act other than to protect you in your basic rights. So Mr. Decent Croix, I don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced because it's French and, I don't do the French, would extend his philanthropy only to some of the industrial groups. He would demand that the law control the consumer to benefit the producer. Mr. Considerate would sponsor the cause of the labor groups. He would use the law to secure from them a guaranteed minimum of clothing, housing, food, and other necessities of life. Again, they're just talking about socialism. It's just an earlier iteration within our modern political thinking. Socialism has always existed, folks. It is the sort of more or less default natural position of all of us. It's what we start off in families, generally speaking. Mr. Louis Blanc would say, and with reason, that these minimum guarantees are merely the beginning of a complete fraternity. That is, a fraternity, a brotherhood under the government. Comrade. He would say that the law should give tools of production and free education to all working people. Does any of this sound familiar? Another person would observe that his arrangement would still leave room for inequality. He would claim that the law should give it to everyone, even in the midst of the law should give everyone, even in the most inaccessible hamlet, luxury, literature, and art. All these proposals are the high road to communism. Legislation will then be, in fact, it already is, the battlefield for the fantasies and greed of everyone. And again, Bastiat is speaking of the French government and the problems that would occur if they adopted these things. But these political philosophies are the ones that the United States were founded upon, and what we have gone so much away from towards what he's railing against here, and the communism, the battlefield for fantasies and greed of everyone. The basis for stable government. Law is justice. In this proposition, a simple and enduring government can be conceived. And I defy anyone to say how even the thought of revolution, of insurrection, or the slightest uprising could rise against a government whose organized force was confined only to suppressing injustice. Under such a regime, there would be the most prosperity. This is actually true. This is what happened in the United States and in England specifically, and other parts of the Western world that had very laissez-faire governments. Everyone got very rich, and then what happened was the progressive era came in and they started implementing the socialism. And we then slowed down that prosperous growth. And it would be the most equally distributed. As for the suffering that are inseparable from humanity, no one would even think of accusing the government for them. This is true because if the government, This is true because if the force of government were limited to suppressing injustice, then government would be as innocent of these sufferings as it is now innocent of change in the temperament or temperature. As proof of this statement, consider this question. Have the people ever been known to raise against the Court of Appeals or mob a justice of peace in order to get higher wages, free credit, tools of production, favorable tariffs, or government-created jobs? Everyone knows perfectly well that such matters are not within the jurisdiction of the Court of Appeals or the justice of the peace. And if government were limited to its proper functions, everyone would soon learn that these matters are not within the jurisdiction of the law itself. Well, that's an interesting statement in today's political climate, because we have an utterly corrupt court system that does act as a legislature in many cases. But make the law upon the principle of fraternity, proclaim that all good and all bad stem from the law, that the law is responsible for all individual misfortunes and all social inequalities. Then the door is open for an endless succession of complaints, irritations, troubles, and revolutions. And again, this is what we see today with Antifa, BLM, any group that wishes to prop itself up over another. I don't believe in ethnic rights or LGBT rights or women's rights. I don't believe in those things. I only believe in the idea of civil rights for all human beings, that all are created equal and treated equal under the law. That is the law of justice. That is not the law that we operate under today, folks. There is a parallel legal system depending on your politics. There's a parallel legal system depending on your ethnicity. And that's not to say that it's worse against blacks or better for whites or any of those things. What I'm saying is in certain cases, in certain politicized areas, you will be let go because of your ethnicity or allowed to do things over and over again. A lot of this really comes down to class. And we know that people who are often quite wealthy do not get the same prison sentences of people who are more poor. Again, there's an injustice going on here. And part of this is because the elites tend to look at other people who are elite or wealthy as part of their in-group, part of their tribe. And with that, they think, well, this guy's actually a good person, so they don't need to suffer that much. Where these poor people, they just need to be removed from society altogether, generally speaking. Justice means equal rights. Well, there we go. Law is justice, and it would indeed be strange if law could properly be anything else. Is not justice right? Are not rights equal? By what right does the law force me to conform to the social plans of Mr. Memorial or Mr. D. Meloon and all these other people? If the law has a moral right to do this, why does it not then force these gentlemen to submit to my plans? It is logical to suppose that nature was not given me sufficient imagination to dream up a utopia also. Should the law choose one fantasy among many, and to put the organized force of government at its service only? Law is justice. And let it not be said, as it continually is said, that under this concept the law would be atheistic, individualistic, and heartless, that it would make mankind in its own image. This is an absurd conclusion worthy only of the worship of government who believes that the law is mankind. And to his point here, anyone saying that is atheistic, individualistic, and heartless is just making an emotional appeal to something that men conceive of based within their own customs to maintain order in their society. It is the law is a means in which we all agree upon to live. And that, again, becomes a problem when the law starts plundering one person versus another. Who's making those decisions? Who's really agreeing upon those things? Because I don't agree to be plundered. I don't know about you. Bastiat says, nonsense. Do those worshippers or government believe that free persons will cease to act? Does it follow that if we receive no energy from the law, we shall receive no energy at all? Does it follow that if the law is restricted to the to the function of protecting the free use of our faculties, we will be unable to use our faculties? Suppose that the law does not force us to follow certain forms of religion, or systems of association, or methods of education, or regulations of labor, or regulations of trade, or plans for charity. Does it then follow that we shall eagerly plunge into atheism, hermetity, or basically being hermits, right? If I can pronounce that correctly, ignorance, misery, and greed? If we are free, does it follow that we shall no longer recognize the power and goodness of God? Does it follow that we shall then cease to associate with each other, to help each other, to love, and to secure our unfortunate brothers? To study the secrets of nature and to strive to improve ourselves to the best of our abilities? No, and in fact, what happens is that the propping up of the law makes the law the God itself, right? And the legislatures, the lawgivers, gods themselves, and it is how they see themselves. Getting through this. We're getting close, guys. Getting close. The path to dignity and progress. Law is justice, and it is under the law of justice, under the reign of right, under the influence of liberty, safety, stability, and responsibility, that every person will attain his real worth and the true dignity of his being. It is only under this law of justice that mankind will achieve, slowly, no doubt, but certainly, God's design for the orderly and peaceful progress of humanity. I want to read that again. Law is justice, and it is under the law of justice, under the reign of right, under the influence of liberty, safety, stability, and responsibility, that every person will attain his real worth and the true dignity of his being. It is only under the law of justice that mankind will achieve, slowly, no doubt, but certainly, God's design for the orderly and peaceful progress of humanity. Yes and no. What I will say is I have been reading a lot of the early church fathers, the ante-Nicene fathers, recently on specific topics, and I was reading about government and the early church. And of course, the early church always believed that the authorities were allowed to have authority under God. Now, I take that a step further, and they do talk about this, that the kingdoms of Satan is in this world. Now, I think there may be a division in thought here between me and them, and that they believe that when Christ was resurrected, that everything was put under his foot. And I would agree for those in the kingdom. For those outside of the kingdom, I don't think so, because Christ needs to return to take over to the world and to resurrect the saints and to have the millennial reign. And then there is a second resurrection, which is of all those who were not saints, and then they're to be judged. But again, they were under the belief that the authorities were allowed that authority and power, and they would pray for them and pray for their salvation. And this is very true, and I believe the same thing, that we need to, as much as I don't like his policies and whatever, we need to pray for Joe Biden. Now, I don't know if God will change his heart or not, but how often is this taught in the church that we pray for our leaders anymore? It is directly in the Bible. About both Peter and Paul commanded, if I'm not mistaken. But again, going back to reading the early church fathers, they say this specifically, that law is justice, and that God's laws are justice. So if we were going to mirror anything about the laws, and we're going to do it based in the faith, then the law should reflect justice, not social justice, not communism, not might makes right, and not legal plunder. So back to the text, it says, "It seems to me that this is theoretically right, for whatever the question under discussion, whether religious, philosophical, political, or economic, whether concerns prosperity, morality, equality, right, justice, progress, responsibility, cooperation, poverty, labor, trade, capital, wages, taxes, population, finance, or government. At whatever point on the scientific horizon I begin my research, invariably reach this one conclusion: the solution to the problems of human relations is to be found in liberty." Proof of an idea. And does not experience prove this? Look at the entire world. Which countries contain the most peaceful, most moral, and the happiest people? Well, at his time, the United States, the most free and liberal nation ever developed. And I mean liberal in the classical sense, not the modern sense, folks, not in the socialist sense. These people were found in the countries where the laws least interfere with private affairs, where government is least felt, where the individual has the greatest scope and free opinion, the greatest influence, where administrative powers are fewest and simplest, where taxes are lightest and most nearly equal and popular, discontent the least excited and the least justifiable, where individuals and groups most actively assume their responsibilities, and consequently, where the morals of admittedly imperfect human beings are consequently improving. That's what happens when you have liberty, because you don't have an external centralized force trying to tell you how to live your life or how to worship in your faith. So people actually become more moral, given that it is their own personal responsibility. They tend to be more educated. We had one of the highest literacy rates in the world at the founding of the United States, all the way up till the Progressive era, when the progressives, through many means, including the Rockefellers, had tried to destroy or eliminate our education system, and they've done so. They've done so, and it's utterly corrupt and ideological today. We still teach kids in school, and I was taught this in school, that FDR saved us from the Great Depression. That's utter nonsense. FDR was the continuation of the Depression, much like Obama was the continuation of the Great Recession for 8 years. Things wouldn't have stayed that way had they done things justly and morally and allow the markets to correct themselves instead of the intervention and the God playing that they do. Let's see here. Where labor capital populations suffer the fewest forced displacements, where mankind most nearly follows its own natural inclinations, where the inventions of men are most nearly in harmony with the laws of God. In short, the happiest, most moral, and most peaceful people are those who most nearly follow this principle. Although mankind is not perfect, still all hope to rest upon the free and voluntary actions of persons within the limits of right. Law or force is to be used for nothing except the administration of universal justice. That's not universal equality, justice. Different things. The desire to rule over others, and this is really what everything comes down to. The difference between a reluctant leader and a leader seeking power. This must be said, there are too many great men in the world, legislators, organizers, do-gooders, leaders of the people, fathers of nations, and so on and so on. Too many persons place themselves above mankind. They make a career of organizing it, patronizing it, and ruling it. Now someone will say, you yourself are doing this very thing. True. And it's true of me as well. It's true of me as well, right? But it must be admitted that I act in an entirely different sense. I have joined the ranks for the reformers. It is solely for the purpose of persuading them to leave people alone. I do not look upon people as Van Kalsens look upon his automation. Rather, just as the physiologists accept the human body as it is, so do I accept people as they are. I desire only to study and admire. Right, exactly where I come from. My attitude toward all other persons is well illustrated by the story from a celebrated traveler. He arrived one day in the midst of a tribe of savages where a child had just been born. A crowd of soothsayers, magicians, and quacks, armed with rings, hooks, and cords, surrounded it. One said, this child will never smell the perfume of a peace pipe unless I stretch his nostrils. Another said, he will never be able to hear unless I draw his earlobes down to his shoulders. A third said, I will never see the sunshine unless I slant, or he will never see the sunshine unless I slant his eyes. Another said, he will never stand upright unless I bend his legs. And a fifth said, he will never learn to think unless I flatten his skull. Stop, cried the traveler. What God does it is well done. Do not claim to know more than he. God has given organs to this frail creature. Let them develop and grow strong by exercise, use, experience, and liberty. Amen to that. Sounds a lot like our modern medical practices, honestly, with babies. Let us now try liberty. God has given to all that is necessary God has given to men all that is necessary for them to accomplish their destinies. So let me repeat that without stuttering or dyslexifying. God has given to men all that is necessary for them to accomplish their destinies. He has provided a social form as well as a human form. And these social organs of persons are so constituted that they will develop themselves harmoniously in the clean air of liberty. Away, then, with quacks and organizers, and away with their rings, chains, hooks, and pincers. Away with their artificial systems. Away with the whims of governmental administrators. Their socialized projects, their centralization, their tariffs, their government schools, their state religions, their free credit, their bank monopolies, their regulations, their restrictions, their equalization by taxation, and their pious moralization. And now that the legislators and do-gooders have so futilely inflicted so many systems upon society, may they finally end where they should have begun. May they reject all systems and try liberty. For liberty is an acknowledgement of faith in God and his works. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was it. That was Bastiat's The Law. I hope you guys enjoyed that over the last few weeks. I hope you guys can see where these political philosophies are old. Some of you may know this work, may have known of it before, but as far as a basic political treatise, I say this is about where my politics lie, pretty much. There's not much more I could add to it. We should be living under God's reign, in my opinion, as Christ as our king, and understanding that the kingdoms of the world are not perfect, but God does give them power, but they are actually meant to be raised up eventually by the toilings of men to bring about a horrible, terrible kingdom, because men are imperfect and greedy, and and often not in the body of Christ, not faithful. And they have their own designs. So I'm going to close that out. Check my chat real quick, guys. Appreciate y'all for joining and watching. A reminder that I do have links in the YouTube description and over on the D Live. Shalom, my Jewish friend, says Peabody Nick. Well, I'm not Jewish, so... And as I said that, Val just donated a diamond. Thank you, Val, over on D Live. Anyways, I have links there for the Entropy and the YouTube, and you can go over to the Entropy stream if you want to donate there, or on D Live, of course. So I never really plan on monetizing on YouTube for reasons, good reasons. I don't want them to have that kind of control over me. But guys, if you do want to support this channel, the other thing, there's also a subscribe star, I should have mentioned, but the other thing that you can do, the best thing you can do is show me out, help share me, help grow the channel. I'm just under 200 subs. I'm trying to get there. The way these things work, the larger the channel gets, generally speaking, the easier it is for me to get other guests or to have influence within things and these conversations with people. And it's not even so much that I'm trying to convince other people. I just want to have great conversations with folks and see. Did my stream cut out on anybody? Because that was straight OBS for some reason. I actually have less stuff open now. I don't know why it would go out on me. So, in any case, as I was saying, if you guys wish to help me out, best way to do that actually is subscribe, share, like, those things. Because, again, that helps the channel grow big enough so when I contact people, they go, oh, okay, this isn't some, like, guy who's just got some, wonky YouTube channel, doesn't know anything, doesn't have any followers. Thought it was live. What did you think was live, Matt? I'm live. In any case, looks like it's still running, though. I don't know why it aired on me. Okay, so let's read from The Politics of Obedience. So for anyone joining who hasn't been here before, this is The Politics of Obedience by Etienne de la Botte, however you pronounce, French. And we left off here yesterday. So I'm just going to pick it right back up. This is a political treatise written in the 1570s. There are three kinds of tyrants. Some receive their proud position through elections by the people, others by force of arms, others by inheritance. Those who have acquired power by means of war act in such wise that it is evident they rule over a conquered country. Those who are born to kingship are scarcely any better because they are nourished on the breast of tyranny. Suck in with their milk the instincts of the tyrant, and consider the people under them as their inherited serfs. And according to their individual disposition, miserly or prodigal, they treat their kingdom as their property. Well, they believe it to be so. Right? And that's the idea of the divine rights of kings. He who has received the state from the people, however, ought to be, it seems to me, more bearable, and would be so. I think were it not for the fact that as soon as he sees himself higher than the others, flattered by that quality which we call grandeur, he plans never to relinquish his position. Right. That is the general thing that we know, that most people aren't morally sound enough to give up power once they obtain it. Such a man usually determines to pass on to his children the authority that the people have conferred upon him. And once his heirs have taken this attitude, strange it is how far they surpass other tyrants in all sorts of vices, and especially in cruelty, because they find no other means to impose this new tyranny than by tightening control and removing their subjects so far from any notion of liberty, then even if the memory of it is fresh, it will soon be eradicated. Yet to speak accurately, I do perceive that there is some difference among these three types of tyrants. But as for stating a preference, I cannot grant there is any. Right, why would you have a preference for one kind of tyrant over another? Sorry, guys. I just want to check my stream. When it does funky things, it gets me worried. I don't even understand why. It's not like my CPU is overclocked or anything like that. I certainly have good internet. So, it looks like it's running. All right. For although the means of coming into power differ, still the method of ruling is particularly the same. Those who are elected act as if they were breaking in bullocks. Those who are conquerors make the people their prey. Those who are heirs plan to treat them as if they were natural slaves. Yeah, thank you. Another a-hole. It says it's live here. Yeah, I just wanted to check it outside because it's weird. This YouTube Studios sometimes will show that I'm streaming fine when I'm not. And then sometimes they'll say I'm not streaming well, and you guys say it's fine. I go watch the replay. It looks good. When I get error messages directly from OBS, though, that really does concern me. But I did update OBS, earlier this week. So you never know. You never know if that's a little bug in there. Yeah, Matt, I got you. In connection with this, let us imagine some newborn individuals, neither acquainted with slavery nor desirous of liberty, ignorant indeed of the very words, if they were permitted to choose between being slaves and freemen, to which would they give their vote? Well, we know this, that there are commies in the street right now wanting to be slaves, and they think that their slavery is freedom, because they want freedom from responsibility, not understanding that the only way you can be free from responsibility is to be a slave to someone else. Because if someone's going to take care of you, that's essentially what you become. You're not autonomous if you rely on other people. And guys, don't get me wrong, I'm not making an argument against, society relying on each other. But I'm saying you should be able to do for yourself. Now, it makes it a lot easier to rely on other people, but I, again, talk about mutual exchange voluntarily. So if you have to rely on other people and there is no ability for you to have mutual exchange, you are a slave. You are not empowered. You have no authority or power. And I need not remind anyone, but I will, that the only class of people who has never been able to own property all throughout history, or if they were allowed to have limited property, it was always slaves. All we have done in modern times, we've just reinvented the idea of slavery and called it communism. That's all we've done. Holly's finally home. Good. Well, I'm glad it's been good quality. That's good. Because it is a bright sunny day out. I have very good internet. I don't know why he does these error things. Now, the other week when it was crapping out was because of a storm. What was it? Tuesday night? I forget what night it was. I was trying to watch, or maybe it was probably last night. I ended up watching other things and all in the evening when I was trying to unwind. But I tried to watch Tim Pool in his live show, and it was terrible because I guess the weather, it just kept crapping out. So something around this area in the internet providers, unfortunately. But that's how it goes. There can be no doubt that they would much prefer to be guided by reason itself than to be ordered about by the whims of a single man. The only possible exception might be the Israelites who, without any compulsion or need, appointed a tyrant. That's a reference to Saul, appointed by Samuel in 1 Samuel. It's funny because I mentioned that to Michael Sisko brought up first. I think 1 Samuel is a pretty weak argument. Really? Have you read 1 Samuel? I'm getting this a lot from Orthodox, though. This is why I need to get into the church and really understand what they believe. But I'm going to bring it up real quick. And I'm going to read from a New King James. And here it is. I was about to say, I think it's around 7 or 8. So Israel demands a king. So it talks about Samuel's children and how they weren't good, and his judges were made sons over Israel, and they weren't the best, blah, 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 blah. It goes on. And then the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel in Ramah and said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways," meaning they're not godly men. "Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations." Now, I'm open to being exposed to things, but Christ is our king, folks. Or at least my king. And it says immediately, "But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, 'Heed the voice of the people and all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me.'" So I was told the other day, I haven't fully responded back, by someone over on the It's Just About the Memes, and I brought this up, I think, Tuesday, that go to Deuteronomy 17, because it says that one day the Israelites will call for a king. Okay, that's just a prophecy. So what? It's a prophecy from Moses. The Israelites will want this. And it says that God will deliver them a king. And what I was told yesterday is, well, yeah, but they asked for an earthly king and not the one they wanted from the line of David. Well, you have to show me a lot more scripture to get me to buy that, buddy. I mean, that's all I'm saying. But there are these arguments out there. Either way, it says they reject me. They rejected God for asking for a king. I think that's pretty plain. I don't really take and add things to the scriptures, folks. I read them plainly. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods. So they are doing to you also. Now therefore heed the voice. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them, and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. Now, this isn't the only passage I extrapolate from for this idea. This goes all the way back to Nimrod, all the way to the book of Revelations, and the horror that was the Jewish kingdom, because it was not good. David was all right when he was young, and he wasn't good. Solomon went insane, even though he was given great wisdom, and became a mystic according to traditions. Started practicing witchcraft in his late age, had a harem of, I don't know, several hundred or thousand women or something. This will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots to be his horsemen, and some of them will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over the thousands of captains over his 50s. Will set some to plow the grounds and reap the harvest. He's saying that he's going to make weapons in war, or sorry, not weapons, going to make slaves in war with you as a king. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. He will take your best of the fields and your vineyards. He will take 1/10 of your grain. And he will take your male servants and your female servants, your finest young men and your donkey, and put them to his work. Not God's work, his work. He will take 1/10 of your sheep, and so forth. And need I remind you that the first king that God appointed was Saul. Saul was the first king he appointed. It was what the Israelites asked for. Now, he wanted David to be king, sure. Once David became king, eventually he murdered a woman's husband so he could be with her. I'm not getting your arguments, guys. You're going to have to give me a lot of other evidence. Now, again, this doesn't mean that we don't respect our authorities or understand that God allows them to reign over us. This is a lesson in humility for us to do such a thing. But that's not the same thing as believing or wanting monarchy. So anyways, sorry to go off on a big diatribe there. I can never read their history without becoming angered and even inhuman enough to find satisfaction in the many evils that befall them on this account. But certainly all men, as long as they remain men, before letting themselves become enslaved, must either be driven by force or led into it by deception, conquered by foreign armies, as were Sparta and Athens by the forces of Alexander, or the political factions, as when at earlier periods the control of Athens had passed into the hands of Pisistrates. I guess I don't know. When they lose their liberty through deceit, they are not so often betrayed by others as misled by themselves. This is the case with the people of Syracuse, chief city of Sicily, when, in their theories of war and heedlessly planning only for the present danger, they promoted Denis, their first tyrant, by entrusting him the command of the army without realizing that they had given him such power that on his victorious return, this worthy man would behave as if he had vanquished not his enemies, but his compatriots, transforming him into a captain to kings, from a captain to king, and from king to tyrant. Now, this is like the people on the left who voted for Joe Biden, is it not? They expected one thing and they got another. I do want to bring up, too, it's just something interesting in the video I watched with Michael Sisko. And again, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched maybe 20 minutes of it last night. But with Sisko and Jay Dyer, and they start getting on this topic of kings, and they were talking about how this is part of Western theology and the revolutions and blah, blah, blah. Then how do you explain Eastern Europe? under the Eastern Church. See, this is why I have problems with dogma, because Christ in the church and the faith is logical. Christ is the logic, the logos, the reason, the word. But if we go back and we look at, well, they had the proper theology. Well, why did Russia then murder hundreds of millions of people? Solzhenitsyn said it's because they forgot God. Why did Greece become a socialist nation that can barely support itself, that the EU has had to bail out? Why did all of the Eastern Bloc nations that are Orthodox become Eastern Bloc nations? And then the churches were suppressed for decades. It wasn't until after the Soviet Union fell apart that Orthodox Christians actually could worship openly. So this is a thing, again, that are we talking about ideas that have been passed down by men, that because at a certain point the churches got involved with the state, which they did, versus praying that the state become a godly state and maybe working with them as far as, parlaying with them. Of course, if you're a religious institution or you're a Christian and there's a government who, will take your counsel, you want to say, well, look, this is maybe a better idea to go about things instead of the tyranny which you might wish to present upon us. So again, I'm just airing out questions I have and the logic that they present. And I'll discover, and I have a feeling I won't change my mind, but I am open. And I hate to say that up front, but I'm only stating that up front because it is a bias of mine. It's also part of my personality, though, because I just don't like bullies. And government tends to be exactly that. It tends to be tyrannical and bullying. Holly said, I don't have to go back over it, but I wanted to comment on the EPA corruption. Looking back to the 90s, the EPA and DuPont and West Virginia knowingly poisoning the groundwater. Yeah, happens all the time. EPA is a bureaucracy. This is why, EPA is not a great organization. This is the same thing with HIPAA and HIPAA rules. Initially, or not HIPAA, what am I thinking of? Whatever the workplace thing is, I cannot think of it off the top of my head. In any case, they started certain workplace safety rules, and with that, accidents went down, but nothing's changed since then. But yet we have this big giant bureaucracy, and they come through and they do stupid things. And by the way, how in the world does the federal government get to operate that way anyways? That's a states' rights issue. That's not in the federal purview. The federal government only has the ability to regulate commerce between states. That is, from one state to the next state. That is to make uniform across the states, not individually inside a state. That is not a constitutional power of theirs. Now, the courts changed their mind on that after FDR decided to pack the court, and he never went through with it. It's all of a sudden the Supreme Court was like, oh no, all of a sudden we found this constitutional, the thing that we rejected numerous times before. OSHA, thank you. Thank you, wife and Holly. Yes. What is it? The occupational, I don't even remember what all that is. I used to have to know this stuff for work, of course. It is incredible how as soon as people become subject to it promptly falls into such complete forgetfulness of its freedom that it can hardly be rused to the point of regaining it, obeying so easily and so willingly that one is led to say, on beholding such a situation, that this people has not so much lost its liberty as won its enslavement. Yeah, Matt, I'm just seeing the chat go up here. People say theocracy is a bad because combination of church and state, except all governments seem to be a mix with religion, worship, false gods. Instead, make it a Christian state and nip it in the butt. I don't agree with that, Matt, only because we had a Christian state in the West, and it was utterly corrupt. No matter what, you always come into corruption. And I think that 1 Samuel illustrates that. That's the point of this. That's the point of the narrative of all the books of kingdoms. If you read if you read an Orthodox Bible, you're going to find that you have, instead of 1st and 2nd Samuel and all that, you have 1st through 4th kingdoms. It's just how they named it. Instead of 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then 1st and 2nd kingdoms. So these are the kingdoms of Israel. Now there's other books that talk about them, of course. There's many prophets. Once Israel became its own kingdom, though, it went and did the same thing it did before, but made it much worse. They were corrupt under the judges because it always comes back to the individual and the individual state. Now, an argument Michael made to me yesterday, and again, we probably only talked 15 minutes, 20 minutes about this, but was that the judges weren't the best either. I would agree, but again, you're arguing against yourself, because my argument is always going to be God is our king, and if we follow Christ as our king, the king above all kings, over all dominion, all things are under his foot, then we cannot err, because Christ will always treat us appropriately. An earthly kingdom cannot do that. And again, I say I would evidence that through the history of mankind and the scriptures. So, occupational safety and health administration. Thank you, Dollhawk. Maybe I'm guessing. Hubby was an iron worker for 25 years. OSHA implemented the rules that caused more falls near. Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's get back here. Let's see, guys. I might go a little over today, over 5. Probably won't go too far over, though. It is true that in the beginning men submit under constraint and by force, but those who come after them obey without regard and perform willingly what their predecessors had done because they had to. This is why men born under the yoke and then nourished and reared in slavery are content. That's why immediately after the fall of the Soviet Union, a lot of surveys in Russia, a lot of people wanted the Soviet Union back because they didn't know how to act. They've been so broken as a people. They didn't know how to support themselves. And again, I will point back to the history of the Slavic nations being serfs, and before that slaves, the most highly prized slaves in the world. You know, African slave trade might have been a big deal for a while, but before that, man, the Slavs, they were it. And I would say even during the African slave trade, the Slavs were it. I think because of Christendom, there was less slavery with the Slavs over time, whereas it hadn't really infiltrated most of Africa. And a lot of those, of course, slaves were sold from other African nations or through the Jewish slave trade or the Muslim slave trade. This is why men born under the yoke and then nourished and reared in slavery are content, without further effort to live in their native circumstances, unaware of any other state or right, and considering as quite natural the condition into which they were born. There is, however, no air so spendthrift or different that he does not sometimes scan the account books of his father in order to see if he is enjoying all the privileges of his legacy, or whether perchance his rights and those of his predecessors have not been encroached upon. Nevertheless, it is clear enough that the powerful influence of customs in no respect more compelling than in this, namely habituation to subjugation. Yeah, that's exactly what we live in now. We live in 5 generations of habitual subjugation, unconstitutional, according to the United States Constitution, and we don't operate on it. If we did, we would have a gold standard. If we did, the government would not be implementing the things it's doing now, would not be talking about a national minimum wage or any of those things, would not be hyperinflating the money, would not be giving out foreign aid to all nations in the world to buy friends. It is said that Mithridates, and here, real quick, it's a little footnote. Next to Hannibal, the most dreaded and potential enemy of Roman power, the reference in the text is to his youth when he spent some years in the retirement hardening himself and immunizing himself against poison. In his old age, defeated by Pompey, betrayed by his own son. So it is said that Mithridates trained himself to drink poison. And need I remind you, folks, once again, 1500s, this man knows of these ancient things because this was part of classical education. How much of this do you know? I always ask. We don't know where we come from anymore, which is why I read stuff like this to you all. Like him, we learn to swallow and not to find bitter the venom of servitude. It cannot be denied that nature is influential in shaping us to her will and making us reveal our rich or meager endowment. Yet it must be admitted that she has less power over us than custom, for the reason that native endowment, no matter how good, is dissipated unless encouraged, whereas environment always shapes us in its own way. Whatever that we may be, in spite of nature's gifts, the good seed that nature plants in us is so slight and so slippery that it cannot withstand the least harm from wrong nourishment. It flourishes less easily, becomes spoiled, withers, and comes to nothing. Fruit trees retain their own particular quality if permitted to grow undisturbed, but lose it promptly and bear strange fruit, not their own, when engrafted. Every herb has its particular characteristic, its virtues and properties, yet fostered, weather, soil, or the gardener's hand increase or diminish its strength. The plant seen one spot cannot be recognized in another. So he's talking about bearing fruit and how you bear fruit, and this is a good biblical analogy. And he's saying that when you start to interfere with these things, people don't bear the natural fruit which they would bear, and it becomes deformed. Whoever could have observed the early Venetians, a handful of people living so freely that most wicked among them would not wish to be king over them, so born and trained that they would not vie with one another, except as to which one could give the best counsel and nurture their liberty most carefully, so instructed that and developed from their cradles that they would not exchange for all the other delights of the world an iota of their freedom. Who, I say, familiar with the original nature of such a people, could visit today the territories of the man known as the Great Doge. Oh, we got a Doge back then? The ruler of Venice. And there contemplate with composure a people unwilling to live except to serve him and maintain his power at the cost of their lives. Who would believe that these groups of people had an identical origin? Would one not rather conclude that upon leaving a city of men, he had chanced upon a menagerie of beasts? Lycurgus, the lawgiver of Sparta, is reported to have reared 2 dogs of the same litter by fattening one in the kitchen and training the other in the fields to the sound of the bugle and the horn, thereby to demonstrate to Lacedaemonians that men too develop according to their early habits. This is the idea of, train up a child. This is actually true. We know this scientifically now through childhood development. And I will reference Piaget as Peterson does, because Piaget has probably done the best work on childhood development that is out there. And you have to socialize and train your child properly by about the age of 4 or 5, or they never will be. They will literally be a tyrant. We have to breed tyranny out of ourselves. It is our natural state. Think about a newborn. I'm about to have one. All they do has eaten poop, and you got to take care of everything that they do. They cry when they need food, when they're cold, when something's wrong. It is constant attention. They become the center of the universe, and we are born into the world this way. Born into this world completely feeble and weak, having no power, completely defenseless, and it requires the guidance of the elders to take care of them, and at all costs, nearly up until they're about 8 months, a year oldish, depending. So this is kind of an important thing to understand, that there is nature and nurture. You have a personality by nature. Nurture only does so much. But if you do not properly nurture a child and bring them up from the beginning, rear them up properly, they will not properly be socialized. They will be tyrants. He set 2 dogs in the open marketplace, and between them he placed a bowl of soup and a hare. One ran to the bowl of soup, the other to the hare. Yet they were, as he maintained, born brothers of the same parents. So this was an early experiment back in Spartan times on nature versus nurture. It's one of the first twin studies, if you would. How nothing new is under the sun, folks. In such manner did this leader, by his law and custom, shape and instruct the Spartans so well that any one of them would sooner have died than acknowledge any sovereign over other than law and reason. It gives me pleasure to recall a conversation of the olden time between one of the favorites of Xerxes, the great king of Persia, and the 2 Lacedaemonians, where Xerxes. So, by the way, folks, if I remember my Spartan constitutional structure correctly, there was a council, and they had a dual kingship, a dual monarchy. And I think that's what he's talking about, is the monarchs here and what they called them. I don't recall. So when Xerxes equipped his great army to conquer Greece, he sent his ambassadors into the Greek cities to ask for water and earth. What was the procedure the Persians adopted in summoning the cities to surrender? Neither the Athens nor to Sparta. However, did he dispatch such messengers? Because those who had been sent there by Darius, his father, had been thrown by the Athenians and Spartans, some into ditches and others into wells, with the invitation to help themselves freely there to water and soil to take back to their prince. Yes, the scene from 300 where he kicks the messenger in the chest down the well is recorded history. Those Greeks could not permit even the slightest suggestion of encroachment upon their liberty. The Spartans suspected, nevertheless, that they had incurred the wrath of gods by their own action, and especially the wrath of Boeus, the god of the heralds. In order to appease him, they decided to send Xerxes 2 of their citizens in atonement for the cruel deaths inflicted upon the ambassadors of his father. 2 Spartans, one named Sprete and Sprete, I don't know, and the other Bolus, volunteered to offer themselves as a sacrifice. So they departed, and on the way they came to the place of the Persian named Hydarnes, lieutenant of the king, and all of the Atlantic cities situated on the seacoast. Asiatic cities situated on the seacoast. He received them with great honors, feasted them, and then, speaking of one thing and another, he asked them why they refused to obdurantly his king's friendship. This is a word I'm not familiar with, so therefore, in real time, I'm going to look it up.
Obdurate.
Not changing in response to argument or other influences. Okay, there we go. So they refused to change their minds, and his king's friendship. Consider well, O Spartans, he said, and realize by my example that the king knows how to honor those who are worthy. And believe that if you were his men, he would do the same for you. If you belong to him and he known you, there is not one among you who might not be the lord of some Greek city. And just like in the movie 300, this is what they offered. Kingship, rulership, and under another king, right? By such words, Hydarnes, you give to us good counsel, replied the Lacedaemonians, or whatever, however we pronounce that, because you have experienced merely the advantage of which you speak. You do not know the privilege we enjoy. You have the honor of king's favor, but you know nothing about liberty. What relish it has, and how sweet it is, for if you had any knowledge of it, you yourself would advise us to defeat it, or defend it, not with lance and shield, but with our very teeth and nails. Only Spartans could give such an answer, and surely both of them spoke as they had been trained. It was impossible for the Persian to regret liberty, not having known it, nor for the I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm gonna make sure I know how to pronounce this right now.
Lacedaemonian.
Lacedaemonian. There we go. Ah, okay. They're the natives of Sparta. I get it. Lacedaemonians, if I can say it, to find subjugation acceptable after having enjoyed freedom. So I think, yeah, we got several more pages before we come to another section. He's going to get into Cato. Cato is someone that should be studied greatly, actually. But, well, there are a few different Catos as well. So, in any case, I think I'm going to leave it there for the day, folks. I'll run through chat real quick. I saw some of you commenting in there. Get my things situated here. Holly says, more ropes to walk over and heavier gear. Okay. Yeah, talking about the OSHA ordeal. Everything the state does is not, it does badly. State enforced safety is actually just a LARPing bureaucracy. I said this once, and people were defending things like FFA, DOT, yeah. Reminds me of the BS, who would build the roads? Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the idea, and that's all of what Bastiat talks about in the laws, that the best section in there is like the socialists think that, or the tyrants, the social organizers, the people who are the elected legislators who believe that they must dictate upon high how society operates. They think that if there's no state-run religion, then we don't want any religion. If there's no state-run schooling, then we don't want any schooling. If there's no state-run grain, then we don't want to eat. And as I always put it in the context of that, it's like saying that if the state wouldn't put the spoon in your mouth, or the fork, or whatever it is, if they wouldn't deliver it directly to your mouth, you wouldn't eat. It's absurdity. But these people think of themselves in this manner. They really do. This is why we have Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. It's why we have the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, all of these organizations, why we have the Bilderberg Group, why we have the Club of Rome, and the Rhodes Scholars, and various other NGOs that work together behind the scenes to bring forth this new world order. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'm going to bring up one other thing real quick, I think. You know what? Actually, I'll save it for Monday. But we're going to talk about what some things that are in the Bible that are said about this. So I'll just bring it up Monday, though. Holly says, I know children that have been raised as converted little gods, horrible human beings, and turn out useless. Exactly. All right. So anything over on entropy? Oh, Matt, thank you. Thanks for the video. I appreciate that, bud. Matt for $5 there. So, and I see I got 5 viewers over in entropy, so that's good. That's good, because eventually, you know, that's going to be probably the place to be all the time. I'm gonna stick with YouTube as long as I can, though, guys. But you never know. And I know that yesterday I talked a little bit about the COOF and some stuff. I do want to get back to that, but I showed you the articles where you could find the stuff. I do want to talk about it a little bit, but it's just not as big of a focus for me now because it's gone. The restrictions have been drawn back a little bit. And most of you know pretty well what's going on and how the government is using it to control everyone and implement this great reset. And I think we can see this as evident with the inflation and the restriction of work, the UBI, which isn't UBI yet, but it is UBI. That is the unemployment, and the reduction of production. That is that you can't get certain material goods. This is true. The of course building costs have gone up. In that video I played you earlier, they've gone up like I think 35%. Rick Scott mentions because of the price of lumber. You can't get a lot of tech right now as far as computer chips and all because people quit manufacturing them. This is a pretty typical market response. When things are bad, you're supposed to save. The problem is they keep inflating the currency. So whatever you save doesn't matter so much, which is why if you guys have a little bit of extra money, you should probably invest it somewhere. And I'm not telling you where to invest or what, but now I haven't done this. My wife does have a few stocks or whatever, but depending on how this book goes and whatever the sales are, whatever profits I make from that, I will probably be investing some of our money from that into something, maybe some crypto, maybe some hard assets like gold and silver. We'll see. I'll figure it out by then. But yeah. Just understand that this is, of course, coming, and this is just all part of it, and have to be prepared because, guys, humanity survives crises all the time. We've done it many times throughout our history, but we cannot survive something we are not prepared for or do not see coming. So, in any case, it is 5:15 here. It is a lovely Friday evening. I need to go get more sun. Stop being inside. Maybe get some stuff done around the house as well. But with that, folks, I appreciate you watching. I will be back Monday. I don't think I'm going to stream Wednesday here, but I'll be back with the Ends Justify the Memes Wednesday evening. And Holly will be investing in livestock. That's good. Yeah, ammo, food. Yeah, there's the stuff I talk about generally. Commodities. Commodities are always important, folks. But Holly will be my co-host. Holly Midlife will be my co-host on Wednesday over on the Ends Justify the Memes because Tank took a vacation down to a third world country because that's what he likes doing. So, in any case, guys, I'll see you Monday. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope that that you will reflect on many of the things that I've talked about, and I will have more for you to edify your souls and your minds, and continue on this conversation that I'm trying to have with you about getting away from these tyrannies and creating our own societies and building strong societies. Well, maybe you should invest in some wood, dude. Just big piles of wood. But yes, we talk about where we come from and how we build strong societies and what has made our society weak. That is generally my point here, however rambly it may be, and all the billion and one things that go on in my head. So appreciate you all, love you all. Thank you for being here. I will once again be back Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and I'll see you all then. With that said, this has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.